Now representing military officers, we're going to hear from Lieutenant Colonel Shelton Lankford.
Hello. My name is Shelton Lankford. I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Marine Corps, a naval aviator. I have over 10,000 hours of flight time, and I'm a Vietnam veteran with over 300 combat missions flown. I'm also a charter signatory of a petition calling for a new investigation into the events of September 11, 2001. When I raised my right hand to be sworn in as a new second lieutenant in 1964, I promised to defend the Constitution of the United States of America from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I have not been notified yet of my having been relieved of that duty. In this context, I want to mention one of my favorite and one of my Chief Marine Corps heroes, Major General Smedley Darlington Butler. General Butler was held up to prospective officers in my Marine science classes as an exemplar of the courage, devotion to duty, and sense of honor expected of all Marines. He was twice awarded the country's highest military decoration, the Medal of Honor, and his skill and bravery in battle was legendary. That was all I knew about General Butler until long after I had retired from the Marine Corps. I learned the rest of his story from a written version of speeches he made after he left the service. In those speeches, which appeared later under the title of War is a Racket, published in 1935 and reissued in 2003, he confessed that his Marine Corps campaigns had much in common with the hired thugs employed by the notorious gangsters of his day, in that his military expeditions made Mexico safe for the oil industry and Haiti, Nicaragua, and Cuba safe for the bankers and United Fruit. He inveighed bitterly against war profiteers and foresaw the rise of militarism and the military-industrial complex, spurred on by the greed of arms manufacturers and those who supply the wasteful consumption of war to their great profit, and the impoverishment of both American citizens and the countries upon which our martial attentions are visited. Our current conflict would, no doubt, look familiar to him. But his finest hour, in my opinion, was when he became a whistleblower, exposing a plot to overthrow the government of the United States, headed by Franklin D. Roosevelt, with the intent of replacing it with a fascist dictatorship. The industrialists and financiers behind the effort attempted to recruit him to lead a large contingent of veterans to form a military wing of the plot. They picked the wrong Marine, and he exposed the plot in front of Congress. Hearings were held, and the plotters scurried back into the dark behind their money and their lawyers. But the plot was foiled. If General Butler were exposing a plot today, he would no doubt be labeled a conspiracy theorist, the modern label of choice, used to dismiss those who challenge the version of events preferred by government and the media. There is a great deal of persuasive evidence that contradicts the media-preferred version of events. As a pilot, I recognize that there are many aspects of the officially approved conspiracy theory of 9/11 that are incredible in the most literal sense of that word. For example, a severely undertrained pilot who was described by instructors as incompetent to fly even a single-engine Cessna flew an aircraft he had never flown before, spiraling from 35,000 feet to ground level with military precision, to strike mysteriously in an almost unoccupied, recently renovated section of the Pentagon. 4 highly trained commercial flight crews gave up their aircraft to lightly armed slightly built hijackers, apparently without a struggle and without even perturbing the flight controls. 4 highly trained crews failed to broadcast the required hijack transponder codes. After the event, well-established procedures for investigating air crashes were ignored. Positive identification of serialized parts and airframes has never been done. No reconstruction of wreckage, which is routine in air crashes, was even attempted in any of the 4 cases. The flight data recorder data, alleged to be from the Pentagon aircraft, American Flight 77, when analyzed, does not support the government version of events, and requests for clarifications to the National Transportation Safety Board and the FBI received no comment or silence. The most expensive and powerful military in the world failed to do anything to interfere with the planes during the hijackings and attacks during a period spanning almost 90 minutes. Despite the proximity of fighter bases and aircraft on the alert, no U.S. fighter aircraft got within sight of the planes, and yet no one was fired, no one was reprimanded. Several key figures were promoted, including those at crucial positions during arguably the most serious failure of our defense establishment and our national leadership in our country's history. I, for one, want to know why that was. In fact, promotions and rewards were common for those in key positions, from the president on down, whose performance was, by any standard, ineffectual and even derelict. We're not claiming to have all the answers, far from it, but we do call for a serious, independent and rigorous investigation of the events and serious consideration of the reams of evidence turned up by architects and engineers, scholars and scientists represented today here by Dr. Harrett and other researchers. We want answers to the contradictions in the 9/11 Commission report, thoroughly documented by Dr. David Ray Griffin, who has authored a shelf full of books thoroughly dissecting the government's version of events. We stand with firefighters who point out the routine nature of arson investigations required by the National Fire Protection Association standard for fire and explosion whenever a fire results in loss of life or higher order damage. But in the case of 9/11, those charged with investigating the very mysterious collapses studiously avoided even considering the possibility of the use of explosives, despite the evidence on the video record and in first responder and other statements. We ask that journalists join us in demanding answers to the hundreds of questions surrounding these events. We are not engaged in theorizing when we point out the inadequacy of the government's explanation of events. One thing is certain: regardless of who perpetrated the act, and there is clearly ample evidence to suggest it was not the parties identified by our government, there is no doubt at all who completely failed to investigate it honestly. There is no doubt who exploited the event to the fullest to carry out an agenda of military conquest that would not otherwise have been possible. There is no doubt who used the event to terrorize the American people, afterwards with a constant stream of reminders of what we have to fear, complete with color coding and breathless press conferences. In previous crises, our leaders have urged us not to give in to fear. Franklin Roosevelt said in a former time of great crisis that all we have to fear is fear itself. Following 9/11, we were urged to keep shopping, but to be afraid of everything, to the point of supporting an invasion of a country that even the administration could only tie to the event with false innuendos and exaggerated claims. Even today, we're being told that the conversion of an old Burlington coat factory store to a community center in this city is a threat. Post 9/11 political posturing bears a strong resemblance to the old-fashioned protection rackets for which the gangsters of the 20s and 30s were notorious, running them on innocent shop owners. General Butler would recognize it in an instant. We were told repeatedly that an implacable and relentless foe with weapons of mass destruction hate us for our freedoms and are bent on destroying us and our way of life. They claim that only those who failed utterly to protect us when it was needed could protect us from this dire threat by taking our nation to war. Even now, after the falsity of their claim has been exposed, during the longest war in our history, the FBI admits that they do not have evidence that ties Osama bin Laden to 9/11, or even that he remains alive. I support the Building What campaign that identifies Building 7 as a vital piece of evidence that flatly contradicts the propagandistic papering over of facts attempted by the 9/11 Commission report and missed. If the truth will indeed set us free, then it is essential that we demand the truth. I stand with General Butler, who acted on his belief that to remain silent when a racket is being run on the country is a violation of our sworn duty. I call on journalists and other military officers, New Yorkers, and all Americans to demand answers that can only come from an independent and serious investigation with real subpoena power and a rigorous examination of all the evidence. If war is a racket, surely to justify war based on an incomplete and fraudulent investigation of 9/11 is a heinous abuse of the power of this great land. Americans, and indeed all the people of the world, deserve better. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions for the Lieutenant Colonel? Sir?
Comment on the lack of good faith in the 9/11 investigation, in particular the role of Philip Zelikow?
There's a minefield hiding in there. I will only say that the reports that I have received were that the conclusions of the commission were written in advance of the meeting of the commission. So that says about all there is to say about that at this time. I don't have time to go into it in depth, but I think it's highly suspicious, and the behavior of the commission in ignoring, for example, the 100 plus first responders who reported explosions shows what they were operating on, which basically was a scenario that called for them to ignore evidence that was not compatible with the conclusion that they wished to reach.